Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Today I will discuss with you a topic, geopolitical importance of Pakistan. Geographical attributes of a state bring it both some opportunities to avail and some risk to evade. Pakistan availed the opportunities from its geography but could escape the risk it posed. When a state learns how to exploit its geography to the best of its political and strategic interest, the study which comes in shape is called geostrategic or geopolitics. Pakistan's geography where brought the country countless material benefits. There, its unwise exploitation also invited the chaos in the region. Being the gateway to Central Asia and a suitable route of access of the world power into landlocked Afghanistan, the geography of Pakistan suffered from the side effects of the new great game and the global war on terrorism. But things are in transformation today. The northern border with China, where gets ready to bring $1 billion investment in the wake of CPEC. There, the western border with Afghanistan is seeking a gas pipeline. Similarly, the southwestern boundary with Iran will sooner or later the flexible for Pakistan and Iran gas pipeline. Pakistan's newly functional port of Gwadar and the strategic importance it has concerning its proximity to the Gulf states are some new aspects of Pakistan's geographical importance. We shall evaluate all these aspects in this lecture after going through a brief description of country's geography. The murder of Benazir Bhutto focused world attention on a country which is generally overshadowed by its large neighbor and regional rival. India, a country with which Pakistan has repeatedly been involved in armed conflict. Pakistan's geopolitical importance is underestimated, though it's an important factor in the stability of South and Central Asia. Neither a resolution to the Kashmir conflict nor lasting peace in Afghanistan will be possible without Pakistan playing a major role. And international terrorism can only be effectively fought through close cooperation with Islamabad. At the same time, not only is Pakistan the only Muslim nuclear power, it is also facing the threat of state collapse due to Islamizations. Hence, the view pronounced by the economist and shared by others that Pakistan is the world's most dangerous place. They considered military dominance in state and society when General Pervez Musharraf came to power by means of a coup in 1999. He was continuing a long tradition of direct military leadership in Pakistan. Of the 60 years or 70 years since its foundations, Pakistan has direct military leaderships. I had only a civilian leadership for 23 years. The Pakistani military, which is led is in relatively high esteem by the population, is not only politically dominant, it also wields a strong influence over large sections of the business world and other areas of society. The army's importance stems from the different situation when the state was founded in 1947. and the ongoing conflict with India over Kashmir. Even a crushing defeat like the one suffered in 1971 in the conflict with India, resulting in the secessions of East Pakistan as Bangladesh, only interrupted this tradition for 6 years. In 1977, General Ziaul Haq overthrew Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in a military coup and subsequently ordered his execution. In 1979, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan placed Pakistan on the front line of the Cold War. It received extensive American military support and its secret services, the Inter-Services Intelligence or the ISI. They trained Mujahideen for their fight against the Soviet invaders in Afghanistan. Since then, Pakistan has wielded a considerable influence over its western neighbor. A strategic interest and a difficult neighborhood ever since its independence. Pakistan has been confronted with territorial claims from Afghanistan on parts of its northwest frontier province, which is currently KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Afghanistan has never accepted the inclusion of this area in Pakistan following a referendum in 1947. And Afghanistan, with its Pashtun majority, has never accepted as the Pakistani border the Durand Line by the British, which divides the area inhabited by the Pashtun people. Jammu and Kashmir are the Alsace and Lorraine of South Asia, where since Indian and Pakistani independence, the issue of which country these regions belong to has been at the epicenter of political tensions in South Asia. The intensity of the dispute over this region, with its majority Muslim population, stems from the strong symbolic importance it has for both sides. For the Pakistanis, it is the identity of their state as the countries of the Muslims which is at stake. For Indians, the region symbolizes the secular constitutional nature of the Indian Union. Yet the conflict between Pakistan and India has also always been about power politics. The Pakistani elite has never been willing to accept Indian hegemonic ambitions in South Asia, and has thus sought to ally itself with foreign powers, first with the United States and later with China. Pakistan is considerably smaller and weaker in economic and political terms as well as in military terms, following its disastrous defeat to India in 1971. It began to work on its own nuclear program when India exploded a total of 5 nuclear devices in 1998 and declared itself to be a nuclear weapon state. Pakistan was hot on its heels, thus the Pakistani-Indian conflict had gained a nuclear dimension. The nuclear balance has not really served as a deterrent, since armed conflict between the two states was perpetuated through the use of non-state players. This was the case in the Kargil crisis in 1999, when Pakistani fighters infiltrated the Indian part of Kashmir and were brutally forced out by the Indian army. When the trial of the terrorist responsible for the December 2001 attack on the parliament in Delhi led to Pakistan, a renewed crisis erupted between Pakistan and India in the summer of 2002, bringing with it the threat of possible nuclear escalation. In 2009, no, sorry, in 2003, both sides agreed on a ceasefire, and in February 2004, they entered into a composite dialogue. Both sides have given a lot of ground. In 2005, President Musharraf and the new Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, they declared the peace process to be irreversible. Afghanistan and the fight against terrorism following the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, Pakistan was concerned about the prospects of a nationalist Pakhtun government in Kabul, which would renew its claims to the areas inhabited by its ethnic brothers in Pakistan, and might once again cultivate good relations with India. To this end, in order to counter this threat, Islamabad sought to install a Pakistan-friendly government in Kabul. Also, in order to provide greater strategic depth in the event of a new conflict with India. With the purpose in mind, Pakistan set up and supported the Islamist Taliban from the beginning of the 1990s, aiming to counter Pashtun nationalism with a religious fundamental ideology. It is therefore not surprising that Pakistan was one of the few countries to recognize the new Afghan government when the Taliban took power in Kabul in 1996. The attacks of 11 September 2001 in New York and Washington, which were planned in Afghanistan. Islamabad was forced to abandon its Pratique regime in Afghanistan and cooperate with the United States in the fight against transnational terrorism. The presence of the United States and the international community in Afghanistan remains highly important for Pakistan and in geostrategic terms. Were they to withdraw, either having succeeded in their mission or as the result of an escalation of violence, Pakistan strategic fear the forgiving of a new alliances between Kabul and Delhi. That is why the Pakistani leadership is extremely worried by the fact that India has established a large number of consulates in Afghanistan, particularly close to the Pakistani border. Such fears lend plausibility to accusations that Islamabad is not ready to wholly relinquish the Taliban card completely. Relations between Islamabad and Kabul are currently characterized by deep mistrusts, particularly on the Afghan side. The Karzai government accuses Pakistan of having allowed the Taliban to regroup following their defeat and escape to Pakistani territory, and of failing to prevent them infiltrating Afghanistan. The areas used as safe havens and supply routes by the new Taliban grounds operating in Afghanistan are mainly in Fata, which is currently merged with KPK, along the Pakistani-Afghan border. In response to pressure from the United States, the Pakistani armed forces carried out comprehensive military operations against militant groups there in spring in 2004, resulting in considerable losses on the Pakistani side. The traditional tribal structures which existed there had become increasingly radicalized due to decades of influence from the religious extremists. In the tribal areas of North and South Waziristan and the bordering areas of the Northwest Frontier Province, which is a KPK, Islamist groups were carrying out a policy of Talibanization, which is now seen by some observers is a threat to Pakistan's very existence. Growing Islamizations and threat of terrorism in the areas bordering Afghanistan, Islamism has taken hold and is expanding its influence. Its supporters are ready to use violence and model themselves on the Afghan Taliban. This Talibanization has now spread via the numerous religious schools like madrasas to Pakistan's cities, is demonstrated by the lengthy disputes concerning the Red Mosque in central Islamabad last summer. It seems likely the conflict between Islamist and secular liberal forces will intensify further in the years to come. In this sense, Pakistan is reaping what was sown by the General President Ziaul Haq and several of its successors, including Musharraf. These leaders supported an Islamization of Pakistan in the hope of cementing the legitimacy of their own regimes and using religion to counter Pashtun nationalism, which posed a threat to the country's cohesion. The bloody attacks of 7 July 2005 in London, when the trail of the bombers led to Pakistan, and it was also the case with the failed attacks in Germany last summer. Although President Musharraf has decreed that Pakistan's 50,000 to 80,000 madrasas will be subject to the same schools as state schools, this edict has only been half-heartedly translated into actions. The threat of Talibanizations of the whole of particularly in the country's two most important provinces, Punjab and Sindh. The opposing secular forces are strong. This has demonstrated by the robust public support for Benazir Bhutto on her return from exiles, as well as for Nawaz Sharif, both of whom stand for a moderate from Islam. Even the moderates amongst Islamist political activists have now rejected jihad as an instrument of foreign policy and are adoring to achieve their goals within the existing legislative framework. Yet it is important to hold and as far as possible reverse Talibanization of the Pashtun border areas in order to finish the risk of stabilizations of Pakistan and Afghanistan. The key to bringing peace to the tribal areas near the border is to ensure their economic development and political integrations. The elections will be decisive in the determining whether there can be a successful return to democracy. The West must do everything possible to allow democratic elections by dispatching an adequate number of electoral observers and exerting sufficient pressures on President Musharraf. Musharraf's political survival depends on whether his alliances with the Pakistan's People Party can come about without Benazir Bhutto, which seems doubtful. Bhutto's widower Asif Ali Zardari is now the People's Party's most influential figure. He spent considerable time in prison under Musharraf on corruption charges and shares a deep aversion to the president with Nawaz Sharif, who was toppled from the power and forced into exile by Musharraf's coup in 1999. This makes a coalition between Pakistan's People Party and the Muslim League possible, something which would not been possible prior to Benazir's Bhutto's death. These coalitions might be successful in achieving a two-thirds majority in parliament on 18 February, allowing it to reserve Musharraf's constitutional amendment and thus force him out of office. The army, also anxious to protect its reputation, might have an interest in withdrawing from civilian life. In a scenario of this sort, it would then only have to be hoped that the new democratic majority, having removed Musharraf from power, would be able to build the stable majority, having removed Musharraf from power. The government needed to tackle the country's urgent problems, which are driving a sections of the population towards extremism. Thus, this is something which both democratic and military governments have failed to do in the past. I think that's enough for today. Thank you so much for watching my video. Thank you once again.